Hi friends, my name is host Eric. I'm an extroverted intuitor, an ENTP specifically. And so naturally I thought to myself, hey, this video sounds interesting to me. The politics of extroverted intuition? Well, Joe from Ghost of Jung here. It's somebody I have dealt with on multiple occasions now. And I would consider him somebody in the typology community that I know and engage with. Which is not really something I really can say about anybody else. I mean, I know some other people in the typology community a little bit, but other typology-minded YouTubers very much avoid dealing with me at all because, you know, if you're reveling in what a great cook you are, you don't want to invite Gordon Ramsay over to yell at you. Anyway, this guy is more robust than most people, more anti-fragile. So he keeps being drawn back, despite the fact that if you weren't an INTJ, no way in hell, because I've been so shitty in my FE. Instead of affording him credit for being better than everybody else, I just say, finally, somebody to yell at for being so shitty. Regardless, let's see what he has to say about this. I'm curious. I'm sure it's all wrong, but let's find out. I guess I should listen to it before I make the determination, huh?
Video in my series on the politics of a certain cognitive function. And since last time I did NI, I'm going to do the politics of NE. And this one's a little bit more fun and interesting. And I think that NE, politically speaking, not attached to a parent function or anything like that, can really be summed up as who knows. Honestly,
Joe. The point is, you can't make claims about how it expresses politically except in a slot because it only manifests via an individual. How it manifests politically is going to depend on your relationship with it, which is determined by the slots.
I don't think any user has any idea themselves where they would stand. It's just really highly context dependent. I think they're annoying in the sense that you would get this waffling and fence writing. You'd be like, well, I could see it on both sides. You just pick a side to argue and they'll be there. When I say argue, we immediately think ENTP, but I think ENFPs would do the same thing. They're like, well,
Except all you have to do is look at me, and you'll see that there is none of that. There is none of that. Well, maybe this, maybe that. I'm unbelievably clear, concise, and accurate in all of my advocacies. I have clear positions on everything, and they're always correct. And you can ask me about anything political, and 99.9% of the time, you will get a clear, informed, correct answer. The other 0.1% of the time, you'll get an answer that says this: I don't know. I need to research more. I need to research that more. Because extroverted intuition is ideational attention. Politics, somebody's political positions or whatever, or advocacies, how robust they can be in their politics links to how robust they can be in their intuition, perhaps, but the question is determined by what goes with their intuition. Intuition is a way of perceiving, but holding political positions is the product of determining. If you hold political positions but you didn't determine them, that means you knew instead, and that's not appropriate for public discourse because public discourse, in order to be legitimated, needs to be validated on universal grounds that can be parsed. And NI, while it's universal, is holistic. So it's inadequate a means to know if you're talking about what political positions you've determined.
I see that. But you know what I also see? This too. If you were to ask them where they stand on the issue, even if it seems like an issue where there is a clear dichotomy of like you're either on this side or that side, they would still try to find the nuance in, well, I could see how somebody could be also here and here. So, and then the conclusion is, it's just one of those things you got to dig into. You got to do more research. It's one of those things. It's a tough question. That's, I think, what you're going to get. I think if you were to ask in any type.
All right. So I want to give him the following excuse. Almost every extroverted intuitor you will ever encounter is an ENFP. Almost every single one. There are remarkably few ENTPs. And so it's really easy, if you experience a lot of extroverted intuition dominance over time, to forget that it may normally express like that, but that's because it almost always pairs with FI. When it pairs with TI, it's very much the exact opposite of what he's saying here. I only say I need to research that more. It's a complicated question. If it's actually the case that I need to research it more. There are very few such questions left because I'm 51 years old and have spent my entire career researching all manner of political questions. So you get very exact, precise, nuanced if need be, but nevertheless clear answers about what the correct position is on every political question you ask me. And it is the correct position. It is not my position. I am telling you not what I think should be done politically. I'm telling you which argument wins. And that's the only fair way we have to determine what's correct.
What their political party is, you'd get independent. They collect all the information. They don't like to pick a side. They're always, 1 year they were Democrat, 1 year they were Republican, 1 year they're Libertarian. You know what I mean? There's a little bit of that P type always wanting more information. That NE function, that perceiving function, always saying, well, I'm always gathering. Thus, I can't at any point in time tell you what I think about it.
So, also not true. The people who don't want to affirm clear positions are FINE people because they recognize language as something they're using to express themselves, and clarity and firmness of affirming a given statement or claim seems to an FI person a rejection of the fundamental mushiness of decision making, of determination. Because for them, it's an operational value. Determination is about checking against your own mush to see if you're being authentic. And that's not appropriate for politics at all, because authenticity doesn't matter when we need to determine what's the universal correctness. Whether I authentically like that correctness or not is irrelevant. So what's universally correct about Roe v. Wade? Abortion was never a federal matter to begin with. The Supreme Court, if it wanted to make it a federal matter, needed to create a right to abortion under the 10th Amendment, and then they can claim legitimately that it already was empowered to do so because the 10th Amendment affords them the ability to do that. And then, when justifying the protection of this purported right, they could reference it as a right to abortion, which would actually exist as a protected constitutional right. Instead, what they did is they justified Roe v. Wade by appealing to a right to privacy that's not a named constitutional right, that wasn't created by or justified by referencing the 10th Amendment, and that doesn't exist as a right and can't exist as a right because a right means something specific. A right confers a duty onto others. So if you have a right to privacy, then you have a duty to stop looking at me anytime I tell you to. And that obviously is denying each person their appropriate area of claim. So it's like, I can legitimately claim that I have the right to go hide away into privacy. I can't legitimately claim that I have the right to control how you interact in this shared public space. So I've chosen to make myself visible to you in public. I've chosen to go out into public. I have no expectation of privacy, because privacy is not a right. It's a phenomenon that you can cause to happen by exercising your property rights in certain ways. So there is exactly one clear position on the Roe v. Wade question. It was never a federal matter. The federal government could have made it an appropriate federal matter if they had done things properly, namely the judiciary specifically that made the Roe v. Wade ruling. The correct thing for it to have done was to refuse to hear the case on the grounds that it's not under federal jurisdiction. If they wanted to hear the case, then they would need to say, it turns out it was under federal jurisdiction because we determined that a 10th Amendment unnamed but referenced constitutionally protected right to abortion exists, and it's within the authority of the Supreme Court to do that because of the wording of the 10th Amendment. Since they fucked it up every which way but Sunday, the only correct conclusion to draw about Roe v. Wade is that the Supreme Court made the right decision in overturning it. Okay? That is the only correct position. Now, it may also be the case that normatively there should be a protected right to abortion. You might claim that. But even if you wanted to claim that, what you would say is, my state should affirm this right to abortion. You'd still have to concede it's a state's matter, because the Constitution enumerates the powers of the federal government. And if it's not on that list of enumerated powers, it's explicitly forbidden to them. So, the takeaway here, now granted, the judiciary is empowered in kind of devious ways to generate case law that functions more like actual law than any real law does. And you could critique that as well. But fortunately, we are able to, thanks to the goodness and truth of TI and the goodness and truth of NI, we are able to determine which considerations are relevant to which questions. And by eliminating irrelevant considerations, we can accurately answer every political question. And yes, it's not your opinion, my opinion. There's a correct and an incorrect answer to every political question.
I really think that the NE type would be great at like being a political debate facilitator or interviewer, being able to ask both sides of the issue or take all the facets of something into consideration when talking to a candidate or really getting to the bottom of something or asking them to consider an alternative, but ask them to be on the debate stage. I can't remember if I can think of any ENTP or ENFP that's been in a debate in a long time. They'd probably be very knowledgeable. That's the thing you would get. You would get an understanding of both sides. You would get a deep dive and an understanding and probably very, in a way, cohesive understanding. Like, okay, I know how all the parts fit together here, but what do I think about it? What's my stance? Oh yeah, no,
Again, you've dealt with too many ENFPs. ENFPs don't think their positions on things exist so that they can be validated by logic. In other words, they can be validated by other people. ENFPs have strong positions on things, but don't feel any desire to share them with you, because the only thing that happens when they share political positions is they encounter something they don't understand. They don't understand that they've made a claim that can only be correct, that must be validated universally because it's a political claim. It's not a claim in which they're expressing themselves. It's a claim where they're expressing something. And because politics is the process by which individuals successfully thrive as large communities, rather than fall victim to the stressors of infrastructure and such, Politics are uniquely important as a question. The idea that an NE Dom is somehow not aware that that we can't, that we have to have positions on things is conflating an ENFP with an NE Dom. ENTPs may end up deconstructionist, amoral, relativistic, or whatever. But reference my earlier video, which you probably won't watch because it's super long, but it's like an hour and 15 minutes. You get mentioned at the end, by the way, Joe. I talk about you and give you your due credit. I don't exist to shit on you. I respect you more than all the other people in the typology community who are too terrified to engage me. I would point this out, though, Joe, and this is a consequence of your NI Domery. If you're going to talk about extroverted intuition at all, name me. Use me to understand things. Because I'm the only ENTP in the typology community who's not only got the cognitive function configuration, but the SI training to be consistent with that configuration, and a bunch of other stuff to actually get it all right. You'll notice I'm never fence-sitting on shit, right? Sometimes I'll tell you I need to research more. That's when I don't know enough. The reason I rarely say that is because I know almost everything about stuff that is universally validated. And I know almost nothing about my own mush or other people's mush. So, when you're talking about functions in isolation, this is the problem that we have. And a perceiving function like extroverted intuition is a way of understanding the world by talking about possibilities. It's a way of determining what is by articulating all the things that it's not. It's a lot of different expressions of self verbally and or ideationally, but it's absolutely not a deliberation function. It doesn't determine statuses of things. So the fact that I can see all the possibilities doesn't make me less able to determine the correct status. It makes me uniquely able to determine the correct status.
Oh man, it's one of those things where it's just like, how can you decide? I make fun of them just because I love them and love-hate relationship with ENFPs and ENTPs, but that is what you're going to get. Well, I say that I don't know any types of running for office, and then I forget. Who can forget Kanye West? I mean, what did he get? Like half of a percent. So we saw that campaign. It was all over the place. It was unique. Definitely, there was not a lot of stage management and being polished. So that's what you'll also get. I mean, it'd be interesting to see like an ENTP or ENFP run for political office. But in terms of the function itself, NE, I don't think it would ever take a stand. I mean, they would be the annoying independent of the.
You're right about that, Joe. The function itself would never take a stand. Because we can't be right about cognitive functions when we pretend that cognitive functions are people who take action by themselves. I mean, there is no extroverted intuition existing except as an expression of an NETI configuration, an NEFI configuration, or in a non-dominant role.
That would get 1% of the vote each time. But I also see NE as being fundamentally the most uninterested in politics. And the reason I say they'd be uninterested is just that they would discover that politics is really the same thing over and over and over. That there's no change, there's no alternative options. People aren't willing to consider something outside the box. So I think they would be very bored by political discussion because they would just.
Okay, well, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt here and assume what you mean to say is, and that Eric is appalled and bored by the conflation of politics and mythology. It is true that team stuff is not politics, but rather a self-stimulatory mechanism. It's stimming, like masturbation or like autistic people go like this. That's what they're doing when they're talking about how awful Biden is, how awful Trump is. Those are not political issues. Those are mythological issues. A political issue is like what I just articulated about Roe v. Wade. It's very interesting. And one thing that makes it so interesting is that it's ideationally rich and resolvable always via universal validation metrics, because it is definitionally the public, transparent expression of everyone's business, insofar as everyone has shared business. So, however, it is also the case that the people who make noises around politics are unable to engage intellectually with politics. They only engage mythologically. They're unable or unwilling to. And so if you're saying, and any Dom isn't going to be that interested in politics because it's the same thing over and over again, what you're really saying is Eric doesn't want to play pretend politics with these hundreds of millions of complete fucking morons. And you're right. And Eric is saddened and appalled that statesmanship, the adult approach to actual political considerations, rather than the emotional approach to political wedge references, is part of how I'm going to save the world. So one way I'm saving the world right now is including in Ghosts of Jung's calculus for this point forward going forward, that there exists something called a statesman who deals with politics like an adult and who doesn't conflate it with mythology.
See the same cycle repeating itself and be like, I'm checked out of this. I can see how both sides could win, or I could vote for either person, but they might come to the same conclusion that like an NI type would say, which is like, the more things change, the more things stay the same. I think in a political discussion in any.
But that's not true. When things change in structurally significant ways, everything changes. The ascension of information fluidity, once the external metaphysical ecosystem, namely the internet, realized the potential for communications to transcend the law of non-contradiction realities of physical objects, so that I can hear him talking to me even though he's not talking right now. He's probably doing something else. He made this video a long time ago. Because of our capacity to take the low resolution components of a thing, the image, the picture, the words, the perception management cues, the logic, the conditional logic of a thing, to parse it out and see if it's grammatically constructed in a way that makes sense. Those are all just as prevalent in the population as they ever were, but they now have an equivalently robust ecosystem in which to do battle. The universal has always been at a disadvantage to the particular, because the universal ecosystem was truncated. Prior to the internet, to the extent that we had a universal ecosystem or a metaphysical ecosystem, it comprised libraries and the books therein, the canon of stuff that gradually grew. It was a canon that gradually grew because of all the gatekeepers that were implicit to the fact that there wasn't an architecture of fluidity. Now that architecture of fluidity has come into being, we are at a moment of humanity change. We are moving towards a singularity. It's not the kind of singularity Popular Science magazine talks about. It's a singularity in which increasing number of people understand the complete picture, at which point the prescriptive and normative become the same thing. the only reason we think that might makes right and right makes right are different is because we don't understand the complete picture. So when he came in here and said that to me, when he came into the live stream and said might makes right, he was saying, I'm going to show you the part of the picture I do understand. I do understand that if somebody, if you're in Korea at the end of the Korean War, you find yourself with a political choice to side with the communists or to side with the South. It is the case that in North Korea, if you're correct, that won't get you anywhere if the person who's incorrect is the authoritarian. But that's not because their power makes them correct or morally right or even have a legal right, because legal rights require a legal state. Anyway, so it is the case then that might and rights are linked, but as we see in the case of North Korea, while might can make right, aka the police go and use force or threat of force to arrest the guy who steals my car, it can also very much eliminate the possibility of anybody being right. That's what North Korea is. It's a regime in which Kim Jong-un and his father and that dynasty has said nothing gets to validate universally. You always have to check against our arbitrary particulars. So that is a demonstration of the fact that might eliminates the possibility of being right in any meaningful experiential sense when it manifests as brutal totalitarianism. And that might enables a civil society when it manifests as the defense of individuals' rights. Regardless, the issue of rights and the question of rights exists independent of the question of might and is a separate question to be asked. When I say the prescriptive and the normative will come together to mean the same thing as a singularity when the full picture is understood, what I mean by that is the only reason Putin invades Ukraine is because he's stupid and doesn't understand anything. Now, you might additionally say, no, it's because we didn't do anything to stop him. Well, then we'd not be using language well. That would be the following thing. It's additionally the case that we're failing by not being action enough. But that's a much different ethical question. The robber who runs into the store with a gun and tells everybody to get on the floor and steals everybody's wallet is guilty of all the wrongdoing. As he's running out of the store, I see him running out of the store, but I don't quite process immediately what's going on. I go, whoa, excuse me, and let him go right past me. Even though he was turned this way and I could have tackled him and saved the day. I'm not responsible for any of the harms. You might say, God, Eric, why did you do that? Why didn't you fix this thing when you had the chance? Well, because I'm freaking stupid or something. But the point is, it's not my fault. I didn't create the problem. I'm not responsible to fix it. And I'm not morally responsible for any moral harms, right? This is what it means to be extroverted intuition with introverted thinking. It's the exact opposite of what you're saying, Ghost of Jung. It is not a failure to be specific in your affirmations, nor to be willing to affirm concretely and without waffling. When it's paired with introverted thinking, it's not that at all.
Dominant user, you would get what could seem like almost extroverted feeling or FE. Whereas if there was some sort of rapport that was needed to be built with the person, you could agree. They'd be like, oh yeah, you know what, I see your point. And then also build upon their point to build that rapport, but not really caring at all about the position or whether they're right or wrong. It's evaluated either way. I think the only way, if you're going to get more specific, the ENTP might use it as in a manipulative way to get something from the person. But I think the ENFP could be more offended than others. They might actually take a stand. Like there will be a part where they'll go, wait, hold on. Okay. Yeah, I can see that, but actually I can't see this. Like we're not good. Like you've bumped up against my FI that we will not continue the conversation or
Okay. I want to concede the following thing. ENTPs are prone towards relativism, amorality, and nihilism. Less so perhaps than INTPs, but definitely prone to it. And for some of the reasons he's articulating. It is the case that if you are excellent at parsing via extroverted intuition and introverted thinking, you will find a way to negate everything. And if you totally ignore or countervalue NI, then you'll pretend as though none of those negations or affirmations are determinate for some stretch of your youth, probably. After all, as an extroverted intuitor, my knowledge function is fourth, and it's my experience that helps me to know things that I trust. Sure, my intuition is banging, but I don't trust it as a way of knowing things. So, the thing to take away from this is Joe has enough experience listening to me, talking to me, hearing me, to have a glaring, red, blinking exception to everything he's saying. But that's 8-slot SI for you. They don't think they need to access. They literally cannot consciously access the particulars that might invalidate their NI because 8 slot's the most unconscious function and 5th slot's ignoring. So, in that regard, this is an extremely informative video about INTJs, about ENTPs, and about Joe and me and politics. The pair of these videos together is, namely his video followed by this. Here's what we learn from this video, right? We learn that waffling is something linked to how one determines, not to how one ideates. We've learned that exceptions, access to experiential specifics, can be an extraordinarily powerful tool in falsifying bullshit. And that if one is too comfortably habituated to ignoring possibilities, then one isn't even going to be able to backdoor into the example you have in your own memory that falsifies everything you're saying here.
So I'm going to get upset and I will pick a side, but most likely they're not going to pick a side unless it bumps up against their FI and they really feel offended or passionate about the subject. Where I think NE would be good politically is absorbing all the different types of political philosophy, thought, all the isms that exist, all the subcategories of each movement, and explaining that and kind of painting in their mind like an image of how everything's connected. And if you were to look at the political compass, they would be able to point where everything is at and understand how it works together. But at the same time, almost kind of taking a weird objective, like this is what communism is, this is what monarchism is, but not being like, yeah, those are both things, but they're both valid in their own way. So, two questions
for those. The fuck!
In political sense, like how do you think extroverted intuition manifests itself in political?
I mean, as fucking if. That's an FI thing, not an NE thing. TI is all about binaries. a TI user is going to make a mistake in insisting that something be either mia or mia and not acknowledging that some hybrid compromisey thing is there. To the extent that TI is going to make epistemological mistakes or express its epistemological weakness, that's the variety of epistemological weakness it's going to express, which isn't a problem in political questions because, as I've indicated, they're public and universal in how we ought to validate them. The only way we can possibly validate them that has any kind of good results, and this is what I mean by the singularity. When you see the big whole picture, there's not any disagreement. You always have to be moral because it also turns out to always be the outcome favoring approach. If you know the full picture, you only think your utilitarian justifications are the wise things to use to make a decision now because you're unable to see how inaccuracy and dishonesty always are bad. And that even if you cannot figure out how it is that this clusterfuck of disaster links to that honesty, that dishonesty, I probably can. And that link story won't be determinate. In other words, because it involves some components of mush, like why people did whatever, it's not a determinate explanation, but it's nevertheless the case that that the determination of what's correct is determinate. So, whenever you're dealing with motivational shit, or the particular stuff, people's experience, people's feelings, their wants, what they want, what's important to them, people's particularist success criteria, TE, have I effectively gotten what I want? What's the most efficient way to get what I want? And or their particular doings, SE, then you're dealing with things that fundamentally can't and shouldn't be justified. The justification is always the same. The justification for why I believe I went to the store yesterday is I remember going there. The justification for why I want that, because I like it. The justification for why that's good TE is because it got me to where I wanted to go without requiring too much pain and suffering on my part in terms of a lot of extra time and action. Those questions are questions that are important, that we should ask about ourselves and our personal relationships. And those same things should never inform our political understandings of things, because unique among all manner of communicative endeavor, politics requires us to excise particularist mush that doesn't generalize.
Political thought or political speech or political musings or something like that. And if you are in any DOM, like tell me about your experience, the political journey, how you came, if you ever came to a conclusion, what that was like. So I hope you enjoyed this series. Quick shout out to myself. I wrote a book. It's called Marble and Sculptor. The link to the Kindle and the Etsy and the hardcover, actually soft cover, but the hard copy will be in the link below. If you want to support your boy and pay $9 or $15, please do that. But let me know what you think about NE as a political function, and if it does even care about politics at all. Thanks for watching.
I do want to support my boy. I don't want to buy his book. Because the thing is, he wrote his book before he made this video. And he's talked to me on multiple occasions before he made this video. And the fact that he failed to intuit any conclusions from his conversations with me that informed that video, I mean, Joe, Ghost of Jung, listen to me. and become genuinely powerful in your ideation. Begin with recognition that this guy, Eric, is miles and miles ahead of me in my understanding of things. But I am miles and miles ahead of everybody else in the typology community in my capacity to understand him while concurrently talking about the subject. So you're well positioned to be right. But it's going to have to begin with a bit of a leap of faith. Namely, that what I'm saying, the big, bold claims I'm saying, that my correct mapping of reality is new, unique, and a sea change for all of humanity, that is the difference between apocalypse and utopia, is not even hyperbolic at all. Because of the fact that we can trace back all of our various conflicts, political or otherwise, to the fact that we never had an accurate map to all reference. In fact, we tried so long to make an accurate map that we could all reference, and failed for so long that most smart people have long since concluded there is no single metaframe. There is no single map that actually explains reality. So it's understandable that you'd be skeptical of the bold claim I'm making here, unless you listen to what I was saying and evaluate it on its merits. Now, I get you're not a TI type, so you prefer heuristics. And on heuristics grounds, the scope of my claims seem to click this box that says crazy ramblings of wild-eyed hobo or something. But if you actually listen to the words I'm saying and evaluate the claims I'm making on their merits, you will discover that, in fact, despite your reservations, hesitations, and serious doubts, increasingly you'll discover, oh shit, Eric's totally fucking right about everything. It's true. So do that. Be better than everybody else. Be the one person, because of your FE polar, who can say, God, this fucking Eric is such an asswipe. He is insufferable. He is so full of himself. He makes ridiculous claims, blah, 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 blah. Whew. I am glad I'm an INTJ, so that the FE considerations don't prevent me from paying enough attention to what he's saying to be massively improved by how it informs me. Okay, there.